we didn't really need to speak at all because this effort of trying to capture something, whether you're doing it to eat or let it go, is just sort of in us. After painting a lot of trout for many years, basically from 9 years old to about 25 years old, I was very focused on documenting the diversity of trout around the world, which seemed like a very strange obsession, but it's sort of what I was dealt. I became interested in why humans draw things in nature at all. Some of you have probably seen these pictures. These are some of the oldest drawings that we know of in cave walls in the border of France and Spain. People, 30, 40,000 years ago were drawing the animals that they were going out into the wild to capture and kill to sustain themselves. And when I was a kid drawing these trout, whenever I was drawing a fish that I had seen and captured, I was reliving the whole experience while sitting at my desk in a very vivid way. It was a way of kind of internalizing that experience. And when I went out fishing again, I felt that drawing and observing, because drawing helps you really see, and it's one of the ways that you can become a more acute observer of the world around you. I felt that by drawing the things that I was pursuing and trying to catch, that drawing helped me become a better fisherman, a more efficient fisherman, because I felt that I knew my prey better. So I thought that maybe drawing in the evolution of humans had some evolutionary value, that it helped us become better at capturing our food when we needed to go out in nature and pursue and capture things. I also became interested in this time historically in Europe when they first had the technology to go abroad with ships and stuff and bring back animals from other parts of the world, in particular the tropics. And when people were drawing things that because in the old days people didn't really get to see much more than what was in their immediate area. So when all these exotic creatures from other parts of the world first became known, artists were in Northern Europe were trying to document them, oftentimes just from descriptions. This is the first drawing by a European of a rhinoceros in the 1500s. And it was drawn from just a description of a rhinoceros that was on a ship headed to Portugal that sank. It never even made it to the mainland. And people just described what it looked like, and this artist drew from descriptions. I think it's a pretty amazing drawing, having never seen one. So the drawings were, because they were being made from pieces of animals that were coming back that weren't necessarily even alive, artists had to sort of reimagine what they looked like in life, and sometimes there were these weird conglomerates of several creatures. But I loved how much imagination was injected into these drawings. And the stuff that was coming back from abroad was being collected by the people who own the merchant companies and the shipping companies, these wealthy people who put together these cabinets of curiosity or wunderkammer, these assemblages of objects that they showed off to their friends. And it was a pretty interesting time. Here's a modern day cabinet of curiosity. So I started wanting to sort of say more about our relationship to nature, and I particularly become interested in how we use language to describe things in nature, and how we try to control nature through naming things. So these are some of the first drawings I did that weren't just pictures of trout or birds. This is obviously a hybrid of a bird and a trout, a parrot fish. And these creatures have kind of become their names in protest of us trying to put names on them. There's a reef fish in the Caribbean called a parrot fish that has a mouth that looks like a parrot's beak. So that's why they call it a parrot fish, but this is obviously a real parrot fish. And this is a turtle dove. Half turtle, half dove. We just started with that slide. That's a duck trout. This is a sailfish. And they're supposed to be sort of stupid pictures, that make us see that that the way we look at nature isn't always the way we think we're looking at nature. And we think we have some idea of what nature's doing, when I think most of the time we're pretty oblivious. In a lot of natural history paintings, you've probably seen of pictures of flowers and birds in your parents' homes, maybe. You see the common name and the scientific name of the creature underneath it. And I didn't want people to be influenced by a name that somebody gave something, because knowing the name of something isn't necessarily knowing it. So I started leaving the names off of the pictures and replaced them with these lines that I felt expressed the place that these creatures occupied in space and told a different story than just a stupid name. So instead of having people say, oh, it's a sea dragon, and walk away from the picture, maybe they'll look at some of the features of the creature a little bit closer. And I would juxtapose in an exhibition creatures that look like they're probably made up, but aren't, to kind of create that friction between the real and the imagined. But this is an actual creature that lives in Australia, related to seahorses, called a sea dragon. This is a lobster. Some of you may be familiar with these old field guides for like birding. And in the end papers to some of these field guides, there's silhouettes of birds with numbers next to them. And the numbers match up to a list of names, so you can learn how to identify them. But I didn't want people to be able to identify them, so I would leave the numbers and keep the list of names off the wall, so people get frustrated and can't name them. These are pictures that I took last summer in Africa of these 3,000-year-old paintings of giraffes on a rock wall. I thought they were very beautiful. And then I came home to do this project where I was painting silhouettes of birds on a wall, and thought it was pretty similar to the same process that these people were making these pictures 3,000 years ago. Although I'm using different materials, some of the materials are pretty much the same. It's remarkable to me that painting is still relevant. It's a very primitive, basic way of making an image, and we still use pretty much the same materials that people were using thousands of years ago. A brush made of animal hair, ground pigments, stuff that comes out of the ground, you grind up and suspend in some kind of tree gum or oil. And it's pretty interesting in this hyper-technological age that something as primitive as drawing and painting is still done. But I think it's an absolutely unique way of engaging the mind with an image. It's different than writing. It's different than any other process that we go through to express ourselves. We have so many wonderful ways of doing it. There's music, there's dance, and each one tells us something different about how we're connected to the rest of the world, which we, just sort of stab at blindly. So these are some of those things. This is the bigger wall that I did of bird silhouettes at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And I make paintings with things like eels. I take dead eels and put ink on them and stamp them over and over on the paper to make these kind of flowing abstractions. These are some of the gallery. Did you want me to stop close to 9 a.m. Is that 5 more minutes? Okay. This is I did a series of these tool creatures. This is a cockatool. It has a Swiss Army knife for a crest. They're kind of commentaries on modern conservation practices. We tend to protect things in nature that are useful to us. So these creatures evolved to be useful so that we would protect them. I did one of a beaver with a chainsaw around its tail, and this is a drilled duck. Then I started making the actual specimens of these creatures, because a specimen is kind of the proof of existence of something, and people are more apt to believe it if you show it to them. This is a flying fox, and the gun is there to represent the tool of the biological collector. Still to this day, if you want to name a new species, you have to kill it and bring it back from wherever you're on your collecting trip. And to prove it exists, to stuff it and put it on the shelves of a museum. These are some sculptures that are made out of bones. Zebra. I'm very influenced by the history of the Natural History Museum. This is the Natural History Museum closest to my house, the Peabody Museum of Natural History at Yale, where I've been going since I was a little kid. These murals of the Age of Dinosaurs was painted by a guy named Rudy Zallinger, really amazing mural. This is Adam and Eve, of course. Adam, being interested in naming in the biblical story, God's first task for humans is to name all the creatures in the garden. So sort of to take possession of all the things in the Garden of Eden by putting names on them. And there's a great short story I really like by a woman named Ursula Le Guin called She Unnames Them, where Eve goes through the garden unnaming everything that Adam named. And when she's done, she hands her own name back to Adam and walks out of the garden, kind of as a protest, sort of a feminist story. It's sort of telling in some ways. So I went on a biological expedition to South America, to a little country north of Brazil called Suriname, former Dutch Guyana. And we helicoptered into the middle of the forest to look for new or undescribed species of birds. We were dropped off for 3 weeks and saw all kinds of interesting creatures, snakes and orchids and moths. We put up a light at night with a white sheet, and it attracts moths. That moth in the middle has the longest wingspan of any insect in the world. So I really like, besides learning from reading books and painting from books, I also like to get out in nature and spend time. This is a painting of the white witch moth from the 1600s. This is a tree viper that any poisonous snakes in camp we would kill so that we wouldn't step on them and die. And because we were so remote, if anybody had gotten bitten by a snake, it would probably would have been the end of them. The guy on the left is a natural history writer named Bernd Heinrich. He'd be a great person to come here. And the guy on the right is my friend Christoph, who's the head of the bird collection at the Peabody. So we put up these nets that are almost invisible and birds fly into them. And then unfortunately we would kill them and skin them and stuff them with cotton. This is an undescribed species of bird that Christoph is describing. And these are all the specimens we brought back. So the unfortunate side of biological collecting tissue samples too to do genetic analysis, is that you have to destroy things. But I had a lot of beautiful things to draw from right as they were dying, when their colors were still very vibrant. So these are some paintings I made on that trip of different things. And I'll stop just about there. Maybe I'll just zip through a couple of pictures from the travels, trying to see these ocean fish. This is a harpoon boat in Cape Cod Bay. Actually, that's a giant bluefin tuna. But I'll end there, and here you can see the surface of this fish is like an oil slick. It's just very constantly shifting and changing. So there's no real way to capture that other than to make kind of arbitrary decisions as an artist. But that's tuna. But thank you very much. I guess I'll be seeing some of you.